Donald Trump's low-energy State of the Union has been widely criticized as both wildly racist and largely lacking in substance. One Democratic congressman said the speech was full of so many lies, Trump should finally receive his long-awaited Nobel Prize for fiction. While Senator Raphael Warnock of Georgia turned to Trump for boasting about taking food assistance away from hungry families. He said he lifted them up from needing food stamps. Not really true. He just kicked them off. But perhaps Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker put it most succinctly when he called the speech, quote, the ramblings of a wannabe dictator outlining his plans to steal our election. And Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker joins me now. Good to have you here, Governor.
Great to see you, Chris.
I'm going to ask what you thought of the speech. Before I do, though, I thought to myself, if you're the governor, do you take 2 hours to watch a speech like that?
I hate to tell you, I did.
You did?
Oh, my God. And I didn't intend to, but I figured it's kind of like a train wreck. You know, you can't not look. And I was concerned about who he was going to attack, you know, what he was going to say. And I was right, unfortunately, that, you know, all the wrong things that he said. And the attacks, of course, are mostly on working people in my state and across the country. So I did watch it, and my wife and I watched it together. And, of course, I put out a statement, but I also recorded something to let people know what I thought.
You know, there's one section where he talks about, you know, fraud, and he's going to declare this war on fraud. And it's very clear that there's many ways in which he wants to use the federal government to go after states that are run by Democrats or vote in Democrats. Do you have any concern about, you know, some J.D. Vance task force sort of putting its target on Illinois?
Well, my real concern is they lie. They consistently they'll find sort of anything that they can twist into a lie, and they'll wrap sort of a kernel of truth with 17 lies. And then they'll put it out there as if they're catching you doing something. And, of course, the president has, in fact, threatened to jail me. So, yeah, I'm concerned. But at the same time, I think my job is to stand up for the people of Illinois. My job is to stand in the way of him harming the people of Illinois. So these days, you know, that's a threat that you got to take pretty seriously.
You know, one of the things he said was he took credit for what is true. One of the true things he said this year is that last year saw a historic drop in crime, particularly in homicide across the country. So points there. That is a true statement as best as we can tell from the data. He wanted to take credit for it. But I thought of you, and I thought of a few other folks, Brandon Johnson, the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Scott in Baltimore, people I've interviewed throughout the year who've sort of been at the ground level. And I'm curious your response to that part of the speech where the president seemed to want to kind of take a victory lap for this historic decline in crime.
Well, I love it. He wants to take credit for the work that we did in Illinois. And it took us, you know, we made significant, when I took office, let me start with this. When I took office, all of our community violence interruption programs had been defunded by the Republican who preceded me. So when I came in office, we had to rebuild. And remember, these things, it's not like you can snap your fingers, send a check, and everything works. When these organizations close down, they have to start back up again. Right. And so just providing money isn't enough. You've got to help, you know, organize them and make them work. So we've done that. By the way, Arne Duncan, the former Secretary of Education, is leading one of the largest ones of these. And so there's, you know, there are organizations out there that you can fund that are ready to go. But we had to work very hard for several years to get these up and running, and those have had probably the biggest impact. I've increased the number of state police in Illinois, and, you know, we've focused on trying to make the system fair and also make sure that we're catching the worst of the worst the way the president says he wants to. But in the end, it was the work that we did that led to this historic drop in crime, and it's been going on for several years in a row. Here, Donald Trump wants to take credit for something that he had absolutely nothing to do with.
You talked about the worst of the worst. Of course, Illinois was the site of so-called Operation Midway Blitz, which happened before this enormous sort of occupation of Minnesota, which just now seems from the most recent reporting to actually be starting to kind of dissipate a bit. It's still not clear. One of the things I've heard from folks in Minnesota is just there's been tremendous cost of the occupation there. I mean, businesses lost tax revenue, lost business revenue, lost school days. I mean, on and on and on. Did you experience that in Illinois? I mean, was there a tangible cost to having that federal intervention, and is there any recompense for it?
Oh, my goodness. I mean, the tremendous cost. Let me start with the cost to our economy and businesses, small businesses in communities like Pilsen, Little Village, Englewood, Austin. These are all places where businesses had to either close down or they had to diminish the customers that they were taking. Of course, what's happening in the neighborhoods, the effect of having tear gas sent into suburban neighborhoods, the fear that's put into people, that had a real negative impact on our economy. And then add to that, our police ended up having to clean up the damage that CBP and ICE were doing in our neighborhood.
I mean, there's like real overtime dollars there, right? That are
honestly real expensive too, and then add to that the effect on the U.S. budget, right? I mean, the cost of sending Operation Midway Blitz, so far the tally seems to have been over $60 million, and that was just for that part of it. There's the impact on them calling out the National Guard and federalizing it, and then hoping that, of course, to invade our city. We fought them in court and we won, but that it cost them and the nation $21 million just to federalize them and have them sit on a federal base.
Well, in pursuit of some kind of federal payment for what happened, you did send an invoice to the president after the Supreme Court struck down his tariffs as both unlawful and unconstitutional, sort of depending how you read the opinion. You basically said, I guess it was $8.6 billion in Illinois that you would like to see the federal government pay back. Do you really think there's a shot at a refund here? Is it your position that Illinois taxpayers should get a check from the federal government to pay them back?
I think Donald Trump doesn't give a darn about working families and the fact that it cost working families $1,700 apiece, and that's how we got to $8.6 billion, the effect on Illinois. But I do know that by virtue of us raising this issue, it's being talked about in Congress, and they're really the ones who get to decide whether there's going to be a rebate or the courts are going to rule it. So I'm hopeful that the fact that we've raised this issue is one that means that the Congress is going to do something about it. I also think that Democrats everywhere in the country should be running on the issue of what Donald Trump has done that cost working families so much over the last year. And take note of one thing, during his speech last night, he didn't say anything about health care, right? He said absolutely.
A little bit. He said he's going to give you direct payment and get rid of insurance companies.
Yeah, but that's, literally it's not going to, what he's done to damage the families of Illinois, the families across the country on health care is immense. Yeah. People are truly going to suffer. What he's suggesting, first of all, not going to happen. Second of all he's interested in doing is diminishing what people are receiving, not helping them get through, what is a hugely costly part of their budget, and also, damaging to people's health.
You are from one of the, I would say, most storied families in particularly in American business, which comes with its own kind of, I think, privileges and burdens. A cousin of yours has been in the news with regards to the Epstein files, Thomas Pritzker. He just recently resigned from the board of the Hyatt company after a bunch of emails and correspondences and associations that he had with Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, after Epstein did prison time in 2008. He apologized for that association. I'm wondering what your reaction to that is.
Look, I've said from the beginning that anyone that's done something wrong needs to be held accountable. And I really mean anyone. Now, I'm not close to my cousin, but I can tell you that it's very important that people be held to pay the price for whatever it is that they may have done. And I know there are lots of names in there, and some people just sent a few emails or whatever and had nothing to do with any of the wrongdoing. But there's a whole lot of people that have seemingly done something wrong. So once again, they are the ones who should be answering. They should be answering questions. And, as you've seen, you saw, I think Larry Summers is, just resigned from the board of Harvard just recently because of, what seemingly he may have done. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that. And I want to see complete transparency. I think everyone that had anything to do with Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell, all that information needs to come out. And then, we'll sift through, who's actually done something wrong.
All right. Governor Pritzker, great to have you here.
Good to see you, Chris.